Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by 3 Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for coffee and conversation. Neil Miller is a lifestyle and healthcare advisor at Maxwell Group, the Stratford. As an experienced leader, consultant, and coach in the senior living industry, he has partnered with numerous organizations nationwide to help communities create a custom-tailored plan for creating an environment which promotes health, happiness, and longevity for all residents. Neil is committed to the mission of changing the perception of senior living communities to be viewed as places where one can go to enhance their lifestyle and continue to grow. Today's topic is What the New Older Adult Wants, Myth-Busting Senior Living, Part 2.
Well, welcome everybody. Good morning. Well, it's afternoon where you are, Danielle, but right now it's morning for me. I'm on the Pacific Coast. With the Marvel technology, we're on different coasts. And then we have our guest right in the middle of the nation. And I am totally thrilled to say Neil Miller is with us. Neil, I knew I first met you, I don't know, it has to be you probably know exactly, but at least 10 years. I knew you when, and now you're all that you are, that people just heard in your resume, and with a family, a big family, and a great job. And they're in Indianapolis. Welcome, Neil. Neil Miller.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, and it's an honor to be able to interact with both of you. Roger, it's great to see you virtually again, and something I don't take lightly. You guys do really important work. So like I said, it's an honor to be here and talking with you guys. So.
And I know, Danielle, that you're thrilled to see him because you work with Neil quite a bit, and everyone likes Neil. I mean, it's like that show. Everyone loves Raymond. Everybody loves Neil.
I can think of a few.
I'm very happy for him, but I'm very disappointed that he, moved on to better things and forgot all about us, Roger.
Tell us how you really feel, Danielle.
He never forgets about us. Oh, I went to Neil's wedding, and we did a lot of traveling together. It's really great to see people who are with us in Masterpiece to move on to make a very substantial mark on the industry and improve the industry. I feel very proud, like a father, that this prodigal son, not a prodigal son, really, because I wanted him to go and make his mark. But I do miss having you in my presence more often, Neil, but
I was going to say we should change that.
We can do it. Well, I'm going to kick this off. The last podcast we had Leslie Clark, who is with us in Masterpiece, talk about the environment today of the new older adult and the prospect for senior living, someone who is considering senior living. And we wanted to build on that because it's an extremely important topic. And I knew that you have a lot to bring to the table on this because of your experience, Neil. So let's start out with the fact that I think, and I think many agree, I know you agree, that unfortunately many people who deal with older adults consider it a homogenous group, over 65, older adults. And, they may not say it, but their actions speak louder than their words, that again, that they consider it homogenous. I would think, and I would like to hear your take on it. How do you, first of all, is that a good idea? And I think I know the answer, but how do you personalize your interaction with older adults, Neil?
Yeah, well, to answer your first question, is it a good idea?
it's only a good idea if you want to keep vacancies in your community. So you talked about treating everybody with a one-size-fits-all approach. I like to say when you've talked to one person that's come into your community to learn more about you, you've spoken to one person, right? In my experience working with folks who have come in who are interested in learning more about us, everybody's looking for something different. Everybody's kind of has their own hook, their own hot buttons, so to speak. And I think really the bigger issue is how we as senior living professionals talk about ourselves. Everybody wants to talk about how, we've got all these communities in the same general area and how we're competing with one another. Well, we really don't have a competition problem. We have a perception problem. I mean, if you really look at your market, if you were to change the perception of our communities so that it would be have less of a negative stigma, if it were viewed more of a place to be rather than a place to stay away from, we would all stay full and have very healthy wait lists pretty much for the rest of our entire existence. And so I think that's really the first thing that we need to change is the perception. And if communities would just kind of simply come together and figure out how do we do that, even if it's just in our general local market, I think everybody benefits from that. But in terms of getting back to, how do you work with folks? I mentioned everybody wants something different. But I guess, if I had to kind of come up with a theme or a pattern of what folks are looking for from a very high level, folks really are looking for an environment where they can go to and they first and foremost can have a sense of peace, right? They understand that maybe they are an older adult, and if something were to happen down the road, they would want to know that they're going to be supported, right? Whatever that need might be. I think that's really just surface level, because right now, people are living their lives the way that they want to, and so they're really looking for a certain type of environment. And if I kind of had to describe, the ideal environment that people are looking for without getting too specific, what people really want is a place where they can live, that they can be able to connect with other people and form meaningful relationships. They want to be able to spend time focusing on the things that are important to them and that bring them meaning and purpose. And they want a place where they're going to be engaged, where they're going to be challenged in some way, where they're also valued by the people that live and the people that work there. And so, another thing they're going to want is to be around people from other generations. So they want to interact with kids as well. There's also the fact that they want to live in a nice place. They want to know that it feels like home. And so with that being said, and the fact that our industry occupancy is where it's at right now, unfortunately, it's kind of like the YouTube song, as the YouTube song goes. I don't know if you've heard it, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Most people still haven't found what they're looking for. So I know that's kind of a long-winded answer to this one-size approach, but that's it. That's my observation.
So that sounds like you're laying down the gauntlet to senior living, that if indeed you want to be full, you better look to what that individual wants rather than feel you have all the answers and they just have to
Exactly.
get it.
And that's yeah.
That's great. And I know that senior living, they have the right, they have the right mentality. They really want to help people. They really want to engage people, but they are burdened with a tradition that some of them can't get over. And that tradition, it worked for a long time, but more and more with the new older adult, it's a little bit out of sync.
Yeah, so Roger, you kind of mentioned it. It's about figuring out what's important to the person. It's kind of up to whomever they're speaking to with the community to figure out what those hot buttons are. I'm reminded of some research that was done by Margaret Wild at ASHA, and I'm sure you're familiar with her. But what they did was they looked at what are the top attributes that correlate with high occupancy and high fees, which is what we all want, right? And the number one strongest correlation
was a sales counselor that was focused on the prospect and solving their problems. So you hit the nail on the head there.
That makes sense to me. Absolutely.
And that leads into my next question, because I know, Neil, you to be a person who lives by your values, and we admire that so much about you. What kind of values does a good sales and marketing team need to have in order to meet that person on a personal level?
Yeah, I guess the values that you would want in any sales or marketing person, and this goes, for even outside the senior living industry, is really basic, honestly. You want them to be, number one, trustworthy. You want them to be honest with you, to tell you the truth, but you also want them to be transparent. So, as often a tendency for sales folks to sometimes bend the truth or spice things up a little bit, and, people trust you more when you're 100% transparent with them. So you have to make them realize that as a community, you're not perfect. There's going to be days when things aren't perfect. They're not going to run perfectly in the dining room. There's going to be days when things might go wrong in your apartment, or, you might go to a program or event that might not run smoothly. So you, as a sales professional, can't set it up as if, to paint this perfect picture. When you move here, your life is going to be completely perfect. And we as folks at the community are going to be imperfect. So I think those are the two things that you absolutely have to have because of the nature of the work that we do. I think that the single most important attribute, though, that a marketing person in senior living has to have is empathy. And you have to be able to treat folks like you would if you were in their shoes. So anytime I meet with somebody, I always try to treat them as if they were my parents out looking for a community. I want them to feel heard because, where they're coming from and what they're dealing with initially, you kind of have to try to understand as best you can. But honestly, they want to feel heard. And you as the salesperson need to listen, and bite your tongue in most circumstances. And when you do speak, it has to be with intentionality. And so I like to use the acronym WAIT, and it stands for Why Am I Talking? Because if I'm talking, it better be darn good. But that listening, trying to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, as well as, listening to everything that they say, that's how you build a relationship. That's how you build connection. And honestly, that's how get people to trust you.
Well, Danielle and I can say that's Neil Miller out the door. It was probably hard for you to come up with those traits because they are so inherent in you personally. But really, I think you knocked that one out of the park. But it's just about good communication, no matter what the transaction is. And that brings us to my next question. Leslie Clark, who was with us before, talked about that basic salesperson potential buyer relationship that can be very transactional, namely that you want them to buy the product, and then once you do, you just sort of wipe your hands of the whole thing and move on to the next one. And that is not what you just described. It could be in the moment, but it would come across as not authentic if indeed it ended with the sale. So how do you handle that, and what do you recommend for others to overcome that basic, I think, belief that people have that a salesperson is only transactional, and then that comes in the way of actually encouraging or convincing someone that this is a good move for them?
Yeah, I think for the salesperson, it becomes transactional if, and I'm sure there's a number of reasons, but if you're viewing it as transactional, you're probably not in the right job or the right industry. If you're just seeing this as another check on your board as a sale, and if that's the case, you should probably look elsewhere. And then there's also, you could come to a place where maybe you haven't had a sale in a while and you become desperate for making a sale or meeting a goal. Then it could become transactional. And sometimes you can kind of forget that, these are human beings that you're working with. And they can certainly sense it too, that desperation is there, and it kind of pushes them away. So that's kind of what I think, a lot of transactional perspectives come from. And, I spoke to empathy, though, and I don't think that can be emphasized enough of how important that trait is. Because when you put yourself in the shoes of somebody that's looking to make a move into a community, this is a major change. I mean, it's bigger than any other move that they've probably made in their life. And the question becomes, you, as the salesperson, are you willing to get in the trenches with this person and really do the dirty work to help them and figure out what is it that's being a barrier to them moving forward? What is it that's concerning to them? And really help them work through it. Like I said, I try to treat everybody as if they were my parents, and how would I want my parents to be treated if they were in here working with somebody else? So, another thing that plays into it, Roger, and you and I were talking about this recently, is emotional intelligence. And, there's going to be times when you're in the trenches and you're going to know from seeing their body language, maybe they're overwhelmed. You're talking about something that's bringing up sad or strong emotions. And I think you really need to trust your intuition to know when to check in with that person and ask them how they're feeling. Maybe there's other situations where you're working with them and you need to ask the tough question that maybe nobody else is willing to ask to get them thinking, or maybe you need to challenge them a little bit. So, you kind of have to use that emotional intelligence in all situations, right?
Yeah, I'll bet you do. I'll tell you, when I go to a sales office someday, I want to be talking to you, so someone like you. That is, I think, this is the wisdom of someone still very young. Everyone's young compared to me, and and yet has that empathy. And we knew it in you anyway, but you personally. But I think if you don't have that human to human interaction, it is transactional, and it's seen that way, and it gets a whole lot more difficult. So I think you're a very articulate spokesman for a very powerful way to connect and to guide someone, if it's appropriate for them. It isn't for everybody. To a living situation that's going to result in healthy longevity. So I'm very proud of you, man. I'm very proud of you.
It's funny on LinkedIn, whenever they say, what is the number one trait that a good leader should have? It always comes up, they must be empathetic. They must have empathy, because if they don't, nothing else matters. And to your point, if you're talking to somebody and they're overwhelmed, maybe that isn't the right situation, or maybe it can be with some modifications. So just being aware and understanding is huge. And as you said, having that intuitive edge of knowing, I'm sensing you're not feeling right. What questions do you have, or what can I do to alleviate those fears, which we'll get into in a little bit. But one of the things that drives me crazy, I know it probably drives you crazy, when someone goes to the doctor, and an older adult, and the doctor's talking to the kids and not the parent, because the parent might be a little bit older. So when they come to your community, a lot of times it's the adult children who are making the appointment. How do you avoid talking to the wrong person and make sure you're including the prospective resident who is actually doing the moving?
You just really have to be intentional that you're focusing on them, and it helps to kind of square up and look at them and speak directly to them. And what I like to do is almost act like whomever they're with isn't even there with us in the room. One of the things that can make it challenging, though, is maybe it's an adult child, maybe it's a friend or another family member that will come in, and they want to do the talking for the person that's actually looking for the community. And in those moments, you really have to kind of recognize the dynamics of what's going on. And again, it's all about empathy. How would I feel if I were that person and somebody's doing the talking for me? And not only that, but the person that they're talking to, isn't talking to me when they respond. And so, if there's somebody that's with them that's trying to dominate the conversation and speak over them, I'm always going to listen to that person. And then when I respond, instead of responding to that person, I'll respond to the actual person that's looking to move into your community. And I think, if you have to do it 2-3 times in those situations of squaring up with the person that's thinking about moving in, we talk about emotional intelligence, but most of the time, if you do it 2 or 3 times, whomever that adult child or whoever is gets the point, they get the hint, and they'll stop. But it's kind of a dynamic that you really want to be intentional with.
Yeah. And we have time for another question before we go to break. And I'm curious because I know you've talked about 14 fear factors. What kind of fears do people have when moving into senior living, and how do you help alleviate them?
Yeah, so these are kind of general categories. There's 14 of them that any kind of fear generally fits into one of these, buckets, I'll say. First and foremost, though, I just want to say that the fact that they're even at your community or on the phone speaking to you means that that person knows there's either a need or a desire that they want to learn more about your community or potentially move in. So that's a really good thing. That's a positive. I think a lot of people oftentimes go to like the Pat phrase, "I'm just not ready yet." And we've all heard it a million times, right? That's kind of a facade, because you kind of want to ask them, what are you not ready for, right? So it's our job as the senior living professional to use questions to dig deeper, to get beneath, just the surface. We really need to ask those questions to find out why. And through, what I would call change talk and asking those powerful questions, you can get down to digging a little bit deeper and then saying maybe, well, it's because I love my home too much. Well, okay, that's fair, which is actually one of those buckets. You could actually dig even deeper beyond that, and ask powerful questions and change talk. What about it, your home, is it that you love? And oftentimes, through lots of conversation, you can find that there's some type of emotional attachment to the home, that their fear is really that if they move to your community and out of their home, that they sell, it's gone. And gone are also so those memories that they've had in that house. Memory of maybe a spouse that's passed away. Memory of maybe their kids that have grown up. That's the house that they brought their kids home from the hospital when they were born. And if I move out of here, I'm going to lose all of those memories. So, maybe it's because they love their neighbors. Maybe they love their backyard or whatever it may be. So I think change talk, asking powerful questions, can really get down to the core of what it is that's kind of got them tangled up in their minds. And that's whatever it is acting as a barrier from them advancing towards making the decision to move into your community, or really, honestly, any community, any environment that's going to be better for them rather than the home they're living in. You might find that it's the house. Maybe it's downsizing all the things that are in the house. You might find that maybe it's a sense of mortality. Like, if I move, this means that I'm old, right? Even though, they're 90 years old and the average age of resident in your community is 83 and a half. So it might not always make complete sense. But those are some of the buckets that kind of the fears that people have. And whatever it is that's got them hung up, you as the senior living professional need to walk through it with them. Ask those powerful questions so that you can help them advance. And ultimately, they're going to be better for it. They're going to be happier for it once they reach the destination. And I can't tell you how many folks that I've worked with that have ended up moving in, and I know this sounds cliche, but they say, I wish I would have done it sooner. Now, I could tell you a story that it's a lady that moved in. I want to say a couple weeks after she moved in, she found me in the lobby and said, "Neil, I just want to say thank you." She said, I know I dreaded making this decision and this move so much, but now that I'm here," and she listed off all these things that she's doing, listed off all these people that she's now friends with, and she said, "I really wish I would have done this sooner." So, those are the types of stories that really make it all worth it. And it's getting to that point. It's doing the hard work, walking through it. I know it's an investment. It's not a transaction. It's not going to happen over the course of 1 or 2 days. Could take months, could even take years, but it's worth it.
Wow. Powerful words, powerful message. Let's take a break and let's get back with Neil Miller.
Masterpiece is driven by data and powered by content. Maximizing healthy longevity is achievable at all times with the right metrics and content, enabling informed decisions. Powered by Masterpiece can support your community in the critical areas of focus that drive healthy longevity for your residents, staff, and community. Learn more at mymasterpieceliving.com.
So, Neil, welcome back. I've been thinking lately. I'm not quite there yet, but I can see the horizon of those who are moving into senior living. I can see them doing it, and I know that myself. The last thing I want is to be someone who is seen as the recipient of everything. And my whole life I've had purpose and meaning, and I wouldn't want to give that up. So how can you articulate to someone how do you, maybe a different way to ask what I'm asking is, how can they become what they want to be? How can they pursue a purpose? How can they bring meaning? How can they make the community better? How would you articulate that to someone? Because I think personally, that shows that your community values them and sees them as having potential, and that can be huge. Plus, when we were all together working, and we always talk about human capital and how older adults are a tremendous treasure trove of human capital that's untapped. So, long question, but I think you know what I'm getting at.
I was actually just speaking to some residents about this the other day of, within the four walls of our community, I think we have the answers to all the issues, all of the problems that exist out in the world in our society right now. Think about the experience and the knowledge that we have right here. It's actually interesting that you would ask this question. I think it's encouraging for folks who are coming in, learning about communities. It kind of challenges their perception a little bit of what they thought senior living might be like when they live in a community. But I always try to start with when I first meet somebody after we've kind of gotten to know each other a little bit, I'll share with them a kind of 30,000 foot description of here's what we're all about here at the Stratford. And I'll tell them, the four walls of our community are beautiful. It's nice. You're going to love the way it looks aesthetically. But as we go around and we visit different parts of the community, I want you to more pay attention to the culture and the lifestyle that we've built here. We've intentionally built it a certain way. And I'll kind of go on and talk about how we encourage people to do the things that are important to them, how we encourage people to stay engaged and have ownership of things that are important to them. And so I really try and set the stage right from the get-go, from that point on. And I think it's really important that people need to see that in action rather than it just being something that's said during the sales process. So it's just not something that sounds good and doesn't exist. So I will actually give them examples of ways that residents are engaged in taking ownership of things and how they're feeling fulfilled in doing those types of things. I might even connect them with residents so that they can talk more about it. Or, they can talk about, how did you get into it? What are some of the things that you're doing? Like, how are you getting other people engaged and all of that? So I think it's really important to discuss those things. And I think, to my knowledge, nobody else in this area is having those types of conversations with folks who are looking at communities. And so I think doing these things, I believe, is a differentiator.
Oh, good answer. Well, I think you're probably articulating that very well to someone new. We're moving quickly as a society, and we have grandparents now who don't want to be called grandpa; they want to be Buck or Big Ed or whatever. And so words are becoming very important. Where a lot of them were accepted by older adults, words that describe them, their life, and that's it. Is it a problem? Certain words that you find sort of stops the relationship, sort of gets in the way of building that relationship you've been talking about?
I don't think it's a relationship killer. I don't think anybody's just going to completely ignore me or disregard our community. There's something that's drawn them to you and your community in the first place. But I will say it's how do you want to be spoken to? We always throw around terms like, nobody wants to live in a facility. How would you like to live in a facility? Or somebody call your house a facility or a structure or building or whatever, right? Like it's just something that we wouldn't naturally do. And I think how I spoke of changing the perception in senior living, that's one of the things that we can do to very subtly change the way people think about it, is change the way we talk about it. Now, let's talk about it in a more empowering way,
That gets back to when you talk about empathy too. If you're saying a word like, what are your goals for moving in? And somebody goes, the kid goal, that's a weird word, because you've mentioned before, you use the word motivator. So paying attention to those words that are what's drawing them in versus what seems to be pushing them away is a really good skill to have.
Yeah, and I think it's the idea behind the words that we use, right? Like, what's the goal in changing our terminology? Is it changing our perception? Is it making our communities more attractive? Is it treating somebody like a human being, like you would want to be treated? So I think the words that we use are kind of like a first step, but actually making good on the purpose behind those words is the next step to take it one further. And it helps you achieve the ultimate goal. It's kind of like you were saying, Danielle, of getting people involved, taking ownership of the community. One question that a lot of people are kind of taken by surprise that you ask them is, what do you want your next 3 to 5 years to look like? Most people don't have a response for that question when I ask them, which tells me nobody else is asking them that question. So they're not really thinking about it, but really, really good communities are asking those types of questions because that's showing them, you're asking me what's important to me. You're asking me how I want to be engaged because you want me to be engaged if I were to move here, and you're going to help me find an outlet if I were a resident at your community to do so.
So I just have one more question. It's kind of self-serving because of our work with Masterpiece, but in the kind of programming we offer and other types of resources, what kind of resources should a community be looking at, and how can sales convey that kind of offering?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in programming or events that go on here at the Stratford, but I will tell you, just based on like terminology that people have used and how people respond to it based on how I kind of speak to it, I think there's a lot of opportunity where we're not doing justice to the things that are going on in the community by how we speak to it. And I mean good things that are going on. I think a really good way to know whether your programming is doing a good job is, and there's a couple of ways, whether it's good and it's being received well by your residents, is what's the attendance like at your programming events? Number one, it's because, if people don't like it, they're not going to come, right? The second thing is, if you look at your calendar and the things that are going on your calendar are the same things that kindergartners are doing in school, run it through the shredder and start over again, right? I mean, you might even have to take bolder actions than that if that's the case. But I think what I'm seeing is people, like I said, they want to be challenged. They want to be engaged. They want to focus on what's important to them. And when somebody moves into a community, they absolutely shouldn't have to give up anything that they currently have. They should be, in turn, enhancing their life, enhancing their lifestyle. And so all those things that Roger, you, and Danielle, all those things that you're doing are important. Our programming, our events absolutely need to be tapping in to the various components, keeping people healthy, physically making sure that they're able to connect socially, because we know that that's critically important, almost equally as important as our physical well-being. So we know, it needs to bring a sense of meaning and purpose to them. We know it needs to challenge the mind. We know that some of the best programs that we have here are lifelong learning lectures we do. Sometimes we'll invite somebody, a professional from out of the community, to do something, like a physician coming to talk about kidney health. Maybe it's even tapping into your own residents. We have a resident whose background is in health science, and he just did a presentation on pharmacological research. I looked at the sign-up sheet. There were 50 people that signed up. That's our maximum capacity for the room. 17 people were on the wait list, okay? So when I look at that, and then I look at something like bingo, or, would traditionally think of in a senior living community where there's only maybe 4 or 5 people coming to that particular program or event. That should really get you thinking. It's like something needs to change, because we have the potential of having 75 people here come to a program, but yet we're offering something that's only drawing 4 or 5. Like there's a big disconnect there. So those are the types of programs that I kind of see that people want. They're starting to demand, and we at the Stratford are trying to do a good job of hearing it and evolving.
Very, very powerful message. You really appreciate that. There's a view that wisdom only comes with gray hair. Well, I think you've blown that mistake out of
I've gotten a few more. I think it's just the lighting in here.
You're wise before your time under that stereotype. But no, I'd like to think that your experience with us got you a lot of this wisdom. But it's clear that you've learned a lot in your new field. And I think you've given us some gems today. And we want to share this with many people, particularly those who may be doing the same job you have, because I think that, again, I think there's some wise words there that we need to heed. And things are changing, and they'll continue to change. And I think if senior living, aging services doesn't change with it, I think that there'll be a gap there that will result in low occupancy.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm excited.
I know you've always been excited about what you do. It's been a thrill seeing you again. I'm in person soon, and really thank you for your words of wisdom.
And we'll be sure to have Neil Miller's email in the description of this podcast. Please feel free to reach out with questions. We want to continue to provide information that is valuable and reliable to our listeners. We welcome your comments and suggestions for topics that are important to you. Please see the description of this episode to contact the Brightside team. You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.